Here's exactly how it took Steven, a professional basketball player who was struggling to improve his explosive power, to now playing his best basketball.
If some of you new followers have wondering where I get my weight schedule from, make sure to hit up Swiss Training. My boy Nicholas will get you right.
My name is Nicholas. I'm a professional athlete. I've been playing professional for the last 3 years and coaching for the past 7 years. I work with pros, aspiring pros, and highly driven athletes to build a mindset, discipline, and create consistent, high-performing habits that will result in long-lasting results, both in and out of the sport. Now, meet Steven. Steven is originally from Belgium, and he's currently playing in 2nd Division France. He graduated from Weber State, a Division 1 school in the United States. Now, from the very beginning, Steven built his game through his work ethic. Late nights, early mornings, relentless work, and this has taken him all around the globe, playing for different coaches, different teams, and always having to adapt to new systems. Now, when Steven first came to us, he just came out of college. He just finished his time at Weber State, and he already felt like he was struggling with something. He had a really good base of his previous time in college. He went through the whole college training system, so that was amazing. He was incredibly strong, but he already felt like there was something missing, that there was a missing link in between the work that he was putting in and his performance actually on the court. Now, the biggest physical challenge that Steven was missing at the time was the fact that his strength specifically was not translating to the court. Now, see, Steven is a naturally strong player, but all this strength has to go somewhere, right? We cannot just be strong and not have it translate to the court. Steven's strength was not translating into his lateral quickness, his agility, his speed, acceleration, deceleration, all these movements that matter so much in basketball. So mentally, Steven also started overthinking. He was getting self-doubt come in. He felt like his preparation wasn't meeting his performance, and he felt like he was putting in so much work, but it wasn't paying off in the end. So on top of that, there was just big gaps in his whole framework and accountability. He felt like his preparation wasn't meeting his performance. There were little inefficiencies in whatever he was doing, and he was feeling insecure and doubting his preparation and everything that he's basically doing. So therefore, we had to make sure that we could be the missing link, and that we had to fill up these inefficiencies to make sure that all the work that he was putting in actually was going to pay off at the end of the day. So Steven needed a system, guidance, and accountability to bridge that gap between all the work that he was putting in and consistent high level performance. And that's exactly where our work together began. So when we started working together with Steven, the first thing that we had to do was a big background check. We had to know exactly what Steven was doing years prior to us starting to work together, but we also had to know everything what Steven liked, what he didn't like. We had to know what kind of impact things had on Steven's body, both physically and mentally. And we had to know what made Steven feel good and what made him feel worse. This doesn't only affect what we were going to program in the off season, but it also carries over at this moment in season. Maybe certain movements have a bigger impact than other movements. So therefore, we can also adjust, even though we're currently in season, to his game performance, right? So if certain movements make him more tired, we try to stay away from those movements close to game day. Anyways, back to the off season. One thing that is really good about working with these type of athletes is that these athletes really know their body really, really well. So therefore, we doubled down on the things that made Steven feel good. We got away from the slow lifting, the bodybuilding approach, and we doubled down on power movements, speed movements, things that made Steven feel explosive, made him feel powerful, and things that we knew that worked for him. But that's not just it. We started tracking every single thing that Steven did. We started tracking so that we could fill the gaps once he started leveling out in certain areas. We knew exactly what he was doing. We knew exactly why he was leveling out, if he was leveling out, and we knew exactly what was going on. Every single training session, Steven also filled in a quick questionnaire right before the training session that gave us a perfect overview about his current stress levels. We know exactly how the workouts impacted his body, his performance, so that we could adjust over time and make sure that he was making consistent progress throughout our whole time in the off-season. Now, mentally, it was also really important to give Steven a clear framework, making sure that whatever we were doing were aligned with his vision and where he wanted to take his game performance-wise, right? So me and Steven started communicating daily. We started texting, we started calling after workouts to make sure that we could discuss everything that he did and make sure that it aligned with the vision. Steven also started to understand that it wasn't just about having one great workout, but that it was about stacking these consistent days, week in, week out, month in, month out, to make sure that we were working towards the ultimate goal. And all this started to result in Steven feeling way more confidence in his approach, making sure that the preparation was matching his performance after the off season, and he became more prepared and started doubting way less what he was doing, because now we could talk about it, we could discuss it, and he was also hungry to learn about everything that we were doing. So what was it exactly that we were doing with Steven? Well, the biggest adjustment that we made to Steven was his schedule. We started implementing high intensity days and low intensity days, and we made sure that Steven understood that it wasn't just about grinding through every single day. Not every single day had to be a really hard, tough day on the body. Once he started doing that, we started seeing immediate results in his fast twitch movements, like his quickness, his speed, his agility, his vertical jump. All of these saw significant improvements once we actually took out all the junk volume that he was doing before. So therefore, implementing a clear schedule and a framework once again made such a big impact on his performance throughout the offseason. Now he was able to recover from day to day and actually go through the whole offseason without being burned out and fatigued. We also had to take care of his nutrition. Steven had a clear problem with training days that were very high in load. He used to feel really fatigued, used to feel sluggish, so we had to make sure that he was actually properly fueled up for these high demanding days. It wasn't just about preparing on the day itself, it was about preparing the days leading up to that day. Now, one of the things that had a significant impact on his performance on these days was his carb intake. Steven was eating pretty healthy in general, but we had to make sure that he was actually fueled for performance on those days that he was working out 3 times a day. Secondly, hydration played a crucial role in him being able to perform on these days. Besides the carbs, we also had to make sure that he was properly hydrated, and again, not just on the day of the training, but also the days leading up to the training. So therefore, making sure that he was hydrating, not just with water, but also with proper electrolytes, and that he was carved up before these training days made a huge impact on his performance as well. So once we had the schedule in order, the nutrition, the hydration, and his mindset, we could actually start focusing on the training. Here's exactly what we did with Steven's training in the offseason. So since Steven was missing a big fundamental part of speed training, we actually spent a lot of time on the track. I wanted to expose him to the main basic stimuli of speed and vertical jumps. So therefore, a lot of our time was spent doing max effort jumps and max effort speed work. One thing that basketball players are amazing at is operating at sub-maximal levels. Their ceiling at 80% might be way higher than some other athletes, but what we really wanted to do with Steven is move that ceiling. We wanted him to increase that ceiling so he could actually operate at sub-maximal levels in games and practices just a little bit harder. So therefore, the main thing was that we had to be efficient with our workouts. I wanted to make sure that we cut out all the unnecessary volume and that we could focus on the exact thing that we were trying to achieve. So therefore, instead of having Steven do 10 total sprints, I preferred him do 3 maximal sprints in that session. So these sessions were not necessarily long or hard, they were just to the point and focused on what we really had to focus on. In this case, max effort sprints, max effort jumps, max effort agility work. In the weight room, we combined this track and field work with some basic things. One of the things that Steven was lacking, despite the fact that he was already fundamentally strong, was being strong in deeper ranges of motion. This was partly due because Steven had some mobility issues that we took care of, but over time, we also increased Steven's strength significantly in deeper ranges of motion. Now, all of this and taking care of these low-hanging fruits resulted in this crazy transformation of him front squatting 80 kilograms at the beginning of May to 115 kilograms by the end of August. So even though this wasn't our primary goal, it was a crazy transformation. So after this phase where we focused on speed work and basic strength in the weight room, we started to focus on him being able to control the weight. Now, we wanted him to move weight very rapidly. We wanted him to work on his power and also work on him being able to absorb forces very rapidly. So we started doing a lot of drop catch work where he would drop very deeply into a position and then explode out of that position. Then thirdly, after that phase, we moved into a more concentric phase where we wanted him to actually explode out of specific positions that he would see in games. So joint specific angles became very important, and that was basically our last phase of the offseason in terms of the weight room. So all things considered, Steven made some crazy transformations throughout this offseason. We increased his 20-meter sprint by nearly 0.4 seconds, which is insane. We took his lower body strength from front squatting 80 kilograms to 115, so almost 30 kilograms increase, and we took his vertical jump from 30 to 33 inches in only 4 months. Now, one thing that's also important to say here is that even though Steven put in incredible work during the offseason in terms of his physical work, it's also important to mention here that all this work that we're putting in was just a part of the puzzle. And besides all our work, Steven was also working out at least once a day, most days on the court, and most days it was even twice a day. So all that extra volume was also on top of the work that me and him were putting in together. We also made sure that we put in a certain system to keep Steven accountable. Now, one of the systems that we used was our basic micro track. Even though Steven is already a highly motivated person by himself, we We wanted to make sure that we had some type of system where we could track micro habits that would make a big change in season, recovery wise, but also in this off season particularly. So we wanted to basically set him up with some small habits that we could consistently track over time that would carry over into the in season where he currently is, so that his recovery would be optimized when he actually had games and practices. So we used our Notion system tracker, habit tracker for him during the off season as well, so we could stack up these consistent micro habits. So I make it seem like the off season was one piece of cake. It of course was not the case. We did have some struggles, we did have some roadblocks. One of the biggest things with Steven was that he was traveling a lot, so we had to adjust to his equipment that was available at times, if he had a field or a track that he could go sprint at. So there was definitely some roadblocks, but the thing with Steven was that he was so motivated that he actually saw these roadblocks as opportunities, and it was never a question about him putting in the work or not. It was more, how do we go about it and how do we go about these challenges? So there was always solutions, ways to work around it, and he didn't see it as roadblocks, which made it way easier on my side. And that's also the reason why Steven was able to make such a transformation during this off season. Now, looking back on the whole process with Steven, there's one thing that I definitely learned. Being hungry and humble as an athlete will take you so much further than the average athlete. My best athletes have these two qualities, and that's the exact reason why they get better. They're not only hungry to put in the work, but they're also hungry to learn and know why they're doing what they're doing. And that's really what separates my best athletes from the athletes that just stay around average or mediocre. So Steven is definitely a high achieving athlete, and I see really good things for him in the future because of these two qualities. So after going through this whole coaching process with Steven, there was definitely some big changes that we could see, both physically and mentally. One of the mental things that really stood out to me was that Steven became so much more confident in his preparation. He didn't have to do the guesswork anymore. Everything was clear and set because of the structure and the framework that we provided for him. So that actually carried over to him being more confident, not only in the way that he approached the games and the practices, but also in his preparation. Now, in terms of the results, obviously the numbers that I just said speak for themselves. He got stronger, he got faster, but the most important thing for Steven is that it translated directly to the court. His defensive movements became better. The way he separates from his defenders became better. His overall athleticism is now actually translating to the court. And this is only the beginning. We have so much more work to put in. The next couple off seasons will only get better. And I'm sure that with Steven's mindset, there is no question that Steven hasn't even seen the best potential yet. Again, in terms of metrics, we tracked a lot of things during the offseason, from his conditioning levels, his vertical jump, his speed, his strength numbers. We tracked everything that we possibly could, but that doesn't really matter to Steven. The only thing that matters is he getting better in live competition? And that is exactly what we're seeing now. Steven sent me a message last week that even his coach was noticing his explosiveness, so everything is getting better for him in live gameplay, which is exactly what our goal was at the start of the offseason. Now, the transformation wasn't overnight. Each week, Steven was stacking up these small little wins that ended up into the success of the offseason. And once we started seeing the click between the physical and the mental side, it was just over. Steven became a totally different athlete, resulting in a whole different type of athlete than we saw at the beginning of this offseason. Now, the biggest lesson from Steven's transformation is that progress isn't always about doing more. It's about doing the right thing consistently. When we first started working together, it wasn't a lack of effort that was holding Steven back. It was direction. And once we learned how to focus on this right energy and started to focus on what actually moved the needle, everything changed. And if you're a pro, a semi-pro, or just an aspiring athlete and you feel like you've been stuck for weeks or even months, and you feel like your training and your performance isn't really going nowhere, then DM me on Instagram. Let's break this cycle today and let's get to work so you can get similar results just like Steven did.